Good afternoon, guys, or maybe I should say good morning. It's 11 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us on another edition of the McGee Law Firm's Interview with the Experts. And today we've got two wonderful financial planners here from Roth Asset Management. Right here we have Mr. Philip Floyd, and then we have Mr. Joe Dowdall. Is that how you say it?
Yes,
Joe
sir.
Dowdall right here. They work together at Roth. They both have a long history with financial planning and financial planning services. And we've asked them to talk on a specific topic today that I hear a lot about in this room. A lot of clients start asking me, questions about retirement and IRA, and I have a lot of knowledge with that as it relates to estate planning and how we want to incorporate that into the estate plan. But there's a lot of other aspects of it that I have no idea, or maybe I do, but I don't feel I'm qualified to be the one to tell people. So that's why we brought these guys in, and we're going to talk about to Roth or not to Roth, and we're going to dig deep into this matter. And the goal is that by the end of this next 30, 40 minutes or so, you're going to have a really good idea of do you want to convert to a Roth or do you not? What are the benefits? What are the consequences? And then at the end, we will have a question and answer with these guys. So if you do have questions that they pop into your head, please write them down. If you're like me and you don't write them down, 5 minutes later, you'll have no idea what your question was. So go ahead and write those questions down, and these guys will be happy to answer them at the end. But Philip, we'll start with you. Please give us a little bit of background about yourself and what led you here to this table today working as a financial planner.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on. The first thing I'll tell you most importantly is that I've got twin girls. My wife and I have raised twin girls to where they're now adults, and so we spend our time traveling to go see football games at their colleges and stuff like that. But on the business side, I've been in the financial planning industry for about 23 years. I've lived through 2 major recessions, and that's impacted the way I do financial planning. I love to do the planning part. I think it's important to go through all the Roth questions and the estate planning process and life insurance and all that. To me, that's fun. I know that's strange, but I do enjoy tax planning and all that. It's just a fun part to study and implement that in clients' lives. So that's really what drives me to be a financial planner and to do it this way, to do the planning the way I do. So.
And you have a lot of fancy acronyms next to your name professionally. Can you explain to us what exactly those mean and what are your certifications and so forth?
Sure. The first one is I'm a certified financial planner. So I've learned from A to Z how to do financial planning for people, how to do investments, and everything in between, all the tax, estate planning and all that. So more of the broad planning, but then we narrowed it down a little more to say we want to learn retirees. We want to learn Social Security and Medicare, how that all fits into the retirement puzzle. And so there's an RICP and a CRPC, and those are both retirement designations. And my final one is a more of an investment designation. How do investments work? And that's a CFS, so Certified Fund Specialist. And all those are really just designations to help me learn specific avenues within the financial planning realm.
Wonderful. Okay, Joe, and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of like we asked Philip, what led you to this point in your life that you're now a financial planner?
Thank you. Well, thank you for having us. Happy to be here. Like Philip, I have 2 daughters. Although mine are younger, we just had homecoming this weekend, which was eye-opening as dad. So I'm working through that. Like Philip, I've been in this financial planning space for a little while, about 17 years. Similar to Philip, I'm also a certified financial planner with the retirement specialist designations. And what I tell everyone about those designations is, having the designations is not to insinuate that we're any smarter than anyone else, but we're learners. And financial planning is constantly evolving. Rules change. We're going to talk about a lot of rules today. And for us, it's just very important to make sure that we're staying on top of all of the rule changes so that when we work with people who are nearing or in retirement, we can make sure that we're implementing everything the way they is best for them. Similar to Philip, I mean, it's a broken record. I love what I do, so I wouldn't do anything else. I actually taught elementary school for 5 years out of college. So I like to believe I'm good at explaining complex topics. I guess today will be the judge of that. But ultimately just helping people and getting to people through retirement and not worrying.
Okay, and the main thing that popped into my head was, as the father of 2 boys, you guys each have 2 weddings to pay for coming up one day.
No, we planned for that.
But good thing you're financial planners,
That's
right?
right.
So they're
That's
going to be ready. But okay, so Joe, let me ask you a question. Talk to us about what is a Roth. Give us some ideas on that.
Happy to. And like a lot of things in financial planning, it's a very simple question with a very complex answer. So before I talk about what is a Roth IRA, I'm going to take a step back and talk first about what is an IRA, sometimes referred to as a traditional IRA. So first and foremost, IRA is individual retirement account. So, a traditional IRA is a tax advantaged way that an individual has to save and invest for retirement. Essentially back in the 1970s, the government decided we're going to incent and motivate people to save for their retirement, because as much as the government loves you, they want you to pay for yourself. So they created initially, again, an IRA.
But the government does love us.
Yes, of course. They love your tax dollars,
Okay.
most importantly.
Fair enough.
But they want you to take care of you. So they created an IRA, which again is a tax advantaged way to save for retirement. The tax advantage is, for a traditional IRA, when you put money into that account, you get a deduction on your income for that year. So if I were to put in $100 today, at the end of the year when I file my taxes, that's $100 less of income. Therefore, I'm not taxed on that. Now, there are some rules, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, but essentially, it's I get to not pay taxes today, I'll pay them later. The Roth IRA, again, a lot of rules there, but again, it's a tax advantaged way to save for retirement. However, instead of getting the tax benefit today upon the contribution, the tax benefit is down the road. So if I put $100 into that account today, I get no tax benefit today. However, when I take that money out, there's no tax at that time. So it's really deferring the tax benefit with a Roth IRA. Depending on your situation in life, either one of those could be really good. And I'm actually going to show a little bit of detail here on some of the rules. So if we could pull that slide, I'll show you, kind of high level, the differences between the Roth and the traditional IRA. For those people that are familiar with a 401k, a Roth IRA is very similar. Again, money goes in tax deferred, money comes out taxed. The difference with an IRA is, as an individual, I can make contributions and create that, where a 401k, essentially you have to be an employer to provide that. So working my way down the list here of differences, on both the IRA and the Roth IRA, there are contribution limits. So for most people under 50, as long as you have earned income up to this level, you can contribute up to $6,000. If you're over 50, you get what's called a catch-up contribution. So you get to put another $1,000 in. Again, the government's saying, hey, if you haven't saved enough for retirement, let's give you a little boost, you can put additional in. With a traditional IRA, there are no income limits. You could be Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and you could put money into that IRA. The issue is whether or not that contribution becomes deductible. And if you look at the slide a little bit below that, where it says covered employee, a covered employee is someone who has a 401k or retirement plan at work. Depending on their income, it determines whether or not that contribution is deductible. So while Warren Buffett could make a contribution to a traditional IRA, because his income is so high, he wouldn't get the deduction. If you look over on the right-hand side of the screen, with a Roth IRA, again, remember there's no deduction on the contribution, so no tax benefit today, but there are income limits. And those income limits are more or less, can you contribute? So if I'm looking there, if I was married filing jointly, which is the MFJ that you see, and my income and my wife's income was $300,000, we cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. We just are phased out. Our income is too high. We don't get that benefit. Going further down there a little bit, on the withdrawal side, for both the Roth IRA and the traditional IRA, you are really trying to keep that money in for retirement. So in either case, if you take money and put it in, now I'm 44 years old, if I put some money into either an IRA or a Roth IRA, and in 5 years, I decide, you know what, I need that money, I'm able to go in and get it. However, on a traditional IRA, I'm going to get, not only have to pay taxes on that distribution, I'm also going to pay an additional 10% penalty. So again, the government's really incenting you to keep that money in there for retirement. On the Roth IRA, the money that goes in is after tax, but any of the growth, if I take it out prior to 59.5, there's a penalty. Now, there are some circumstances where, you know, maybe you can work your way around that. That's where you'd sit with, you know, your financial planner, maybe your accountant, work your way through that. On the withdrawal side, again, you just have to be careful of your age and your income tax. Philip's going to talk a little bit about different ways to invest in these accounts, but on the withdrawal side, you've got to be careful. There's a lot of planning that goes into when to take the money, because the withdrawals can affect your, not only your income tax, but your Medicare premiums if you're collecting Medicare, and your Social Security tax. Now, one further step on the IRA versus Roth IRA, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are familiar with a 401k. Companies are now providing what's called a Roth 401k, very similar rules, just higher contribution limits. And on the IRA side, no income restrictions. So you could, again, be Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. If you have a 401k, you can contribute. And both of those gentlemen are over 50, so they can contribute all the way up to $26,000. On the IRA, that would be totally tax deferred. On the Roth, 401k. On the Roth 401k, again, no income limits, just higher contribution amounts. So it's a great tool. It just takes a lot of know-how, how to invest. And on the distribution side is probably even more important, because once you do reach 59.5 and you can take that money out, you've got to start worrying about your Medicare premiums, your Social Security tax, your income tax, and how all that can be affected. Okay. It's a great tool. Government loves you. They want you to save for retirement, but you've really got to know the ins and the outs there so you don't get yourself into hot water.
Okay, but 59.5 that's the age under pretty much any circumstance where you can withdraw without penalty. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so Philip, let's ask you, who would be a good candidate for a Roth? Who's the kind of person or people that you think would really benefit from this?
Yeah, because the government loves your taxes. I'm going to change that statement a little bit. The government loves your taxes. I believe you should have different tax buckets. So having different tax buckets is going to be important. Having a Roth tax bucket, because that's going to be tax-free when you need to take out a little bit of money for a trip one time. I think that's going to be important. So I believe everybody should try to have a Roth bucket and also have an IRA or a 401k bucket. So you have a Roth IRA, a Roth 401k bucket, a 401k bucket or IRA bucket, and then you've got your savings account, your taxable account. So I think anybody who is a child, children can contribute to a Roth as long as they have earned income. So they go out and babysit. Why not help them learn how to save in a Roth? Because remember, you can put money into a Roth today and take it out tomorrow, as long as it's not the earnings, it's just the principal. You can put it in today and take it out tomorrow with no tax or no penalty. So I think kids should be able to do it, maybe with grandparents or parents' help, after they do babysitting or they mow the yard or whatever. I think young people should be shoveling money into a Roth as quickly as they can, Roth IRA or Roth 401k. I believe that anybody who is close to retirement should be considering Roth, putting into a Roth. And there's different ways to put into a Roth, which I think we'll get into. But I think anybody who believes taxes are going up, which I think it's built into the tax law. In 2026, taxes are going up at this point. If Congress does nothing, taxes will go up. So if you believe your taxes are going up, you should probably consider a Roth in some way or some form.
Okay. And we talked just a little bit about Roth contributions and Roth conversions.
Sure. So a Roth contribution, depending on a Roth 401k or Roth IRA, you have to meet those minimum requirements of income levels, and you have to have earned income and all that. But that is actually putting new money into a Roth. So there are some levels and things that will impact you, but I think if you can fall under those levels and you can put money into a Roth as Joe mentioned earlier, and as a contribution to a Roth, it's a great opportunity. Government doesn't give you many times where they're not going to tax you on future income or future distributions or future growth. So take advantage of that. The Roth conversion is something that we work on a lot. We actually help people by doing tax planning every year and saying, let's take money from an IRA, a traditional IRA, and let's move it over into your Roth. Now, there are some, you don't want to just take your entire IRA and move it over into a Roth without somebody guiding you through this.
Right.
But that's a great way today to say if taxes are lower, if there's the 10% tax bracket and the 12%, and the tax brackets are lower today to 22, and we know they're going to go from 12 to 15 and from 22 to 25 and so on. The taxes are going up for everybody in the next few years. You ought to consider using the tax brackets to your advantage, and that means converting money from IRA to Roth. I think it's a great way to get money over into that tax-free bucket. So there are some rules around that. You got to make sure that you have it in there for 5 years, and you don't want to hurt yourself on the Medicare side. Hit the Medicare tax. You don't want to hurt yourself on the Social Security side. So you want to know all the things that will impact. But to me, that's a lot of our discussions today.
So it's something you definitely want to work with a professional on, right?
Yep.
Just like with estate planning, I tell everybody, I'm not my own doctor.
Right.
I'm not my own auto mechanic. I go to people that they know how to do that, or trained to do that, educated to do that. So thanks, guys. These are things that we want to do with professionals such as these guys. Okay. And talk to us a little bit about Backdoor Roth.
Yeah. Backdoor Roth is it may go away, so take advantage while you can. They're talking about it, and a lot of things may change on the new tax rules coming up that may pass in the next few weeks, the next few months. But at this point, you can do a backdoor Roth, and that's really somebody who has no IRA. That's probably the best candidate, is somebody who has no IRA. So think of it, you may not have an IRA because all your money's in a 401k. Your spouse may not have an IRA because all their money's in a 401k, or they just don't have money in a retirement plan. But make sure it's somebody who doesn't have an IRA, because that's the best candidate. There are some rules around that could trap you if you do have an IRA. But this is somebody who puts money into an IRA. They can't take the deduction. So go back to the Warren Buffett, puts money into an IRA. They have no other IRA money. They put money in 2021 or for 2021, and then they immediately convert that to a Roth. And because they never took the deduction on the original IRA contribution, and they transfer that money to a Roth, there are no taxes due. Okay. There's nothing else due on their taxes or penalty or anything like that. So it's a great way for people with higher income to get money into a Roth, which is why they call it a backdoor Roth. It was never the intention of the IRS or the Congress to allow this, but it's just something that that advisors and people have found can do.
Okay, wonderful.
If I could,
sure.
In the most possible terms possible, it's a loophole.
Right.
Totally legal, doesn't get anyone in trouble, but if you're a high income earner, it's a way to get money into a Roth, even though you may have been phased out on the income side.
And like a lot of loopholes, the government that loves us may close it at some point, right?
They will. They will.
Yep. All right. Now, so let me ask, just either one of you guys jump in here. What do you see to be the primary purposes of a Roth? What are the reasons that somebody is going to want to set up a Roth?
I'll jump in and kind of on Philip's coattails, what he was mentioning earlier in those buckets of money. What we see a lot of is people who will retire, maybe their whole life was spent contributing to a 401k. They may retire with $1 million. And what sometimes gets lost there is, yes, you may have $1 million in a 401k, but when you start taking money off out of that 401k to live, every dollar that comes out is being income taxed. Okay. And if it's one of those years where income taxes are very high, or you need a new car, a new roof, you're just going to get walloped on taxes. Okay. When we can get a person to multiple buckets, they can make a choice on where to pull their money from each year. So in a year, they may decide, hey, income tax rates are very low this year. it's no problem for me to take money out of my tax bucket or my pre-tax bucket. But there may be a year where taxes go up and we want to have that option.
Okay.
So it's really about giving people who are at some point going to retire, which is most people, the flexibility on where to take money from at any given point so they can take advantage of. And again, that's something we work with people that one of those designations in there, that RICP, is retirement income, which is all about making, you know, the best decisions possible for people when they're starting to draw down.
Okay.
Because so much of our life is accumulate.
Yeah.
You know, I just need to get a big pile of money so I can retire,
Right.
which is great. But there's a lot of strategy and science into distributions and making the right choices there.
Okay. And how about for you, Philip? Do you see any other potential advantages for the Roth?
Yeah, I think one of the big advantages, and I'll just kind of go through what Joe just said, maybe add to that. Today, while you're working or while people are working, I have the ability to pay tax. So typically in my world, especially the tax world that I love to play in, I'm looking for tax deductions this year. I don't think about 20 or 30 years or 10 or 15 years in the future. I'm really looking at this year for tax advantages, tax deductions, different ways to help my taxes, bring them down. But if you think about the way your life is structured, I'm able to pay tax I'm able to pay taxes this year because I have income. When I retire, the ability to pay tax goes down, or the willingness, I guess. I guess I'm never willing to pay tax or never want to pay too much in tax, but I'm not as able, because I don't have income when I'm retired, I'm not as able to pay tax. So I would just say, think about how your life is structured today. And you may kind of bite your tongue and say, I'm willing to pay a little extra tax today to get money into that tax-free bucket because I don't have that same ability later on. That's just a kind of an additional reason.
Okay. And then I'll kind of add for estate planning. So for those of you guys who don't know this, and you guys correct me if I make a misstep anywhere here, but in December of 2019, there was a bipartisan effort Congress passed the Secure Act. And basically prior to that point in time, if you inherited a retirement asset and you were the next generation, so not the spouse, but the next generation, you could base your withdrawals on the age of the oldest beneficiary, correct? And the oldest beneficiary, let's say if there's two beneficiaries, when the first one hits 72, both beneficiaries have to start taking out their RMDs. That's how it was prior to December 2019. So this is something where the IRS may not get their money for a long time if both beneficiaries can be disciplined and they don't have a compelling need for the money and they leave it sitting there. But the change in December 2019 basically said that all of the money that passes to the next generation that is retirement dollars is going to have to be withdrawn within 10 years, period, end of story. Because the government wants their money, right? They don't want to wait, 30 years to get it. They want it within 10 years, they want to get it. So kind of talk about that and how that makes a Roth even more compelling.
Yeah, there were some intricacies with the old law that gave you some options, but it's an old law now, so we'll really talk about today. For some reason, when Congress passed this law, they basically said that all retirement plans that don't go to a spouse, so go to a non-spouse, have to be pulled out within 10 years. You can do 10% a year, you can do 100% in the first year, 100% in the last year, anywhere in between, as long as all of it's out within 10 years. And and they do that so if it's an IRA or a 401k, they get their tax money, as you said. Right. For some reason, they lumped in Roth because they don't get tax money from a Roth. When you pass away and you leave that to a non-spouse, let's say it's child or grandchild or something, you leave it to somebody, they still have to take it out over 10 years, which is strange. But they want that money out in circulation. They want the grandchild or the child to spend that money. If they spend it, there's taxes generated on that. But so that was kind of a quick switch. We weren't right. We knew could possibly come, but at this point it's here and but the bottom line is the more money you have in the Roth that you pass down to the next generation, yep, the less taxes they have to pay. Yep. Right? Yep.
And I'll even expand on that. As far as the strategy, what we've seen sometimes is maybe parents are getting older and they're retired and their income is very low and they're saying, hey, you know what, this is going to pass on to my children the next so many years. It's advantageous for them to convert that money over from the IRA to the Roth while they're in a low bracket, because they know their kids are high income earners. And if they're paying a 40% tax bracket, there's some strategy there where you can start shifting money. So I'll have clients who will say, as a gift to my children, I'm going to pay the income tax at my rate so that when they inherit this, they're not being penalized at their rates.
Okay.
So there's a lot of strategy that goes into that as well.
Okay. And again, guys, this just sort of highlights, in my opinion, the need to work with professionals, because there's lots of ins and outs, and you do one thing that seems positive in one sense, it could impact you negatively in another way, depending on who you are, your age, et cetera. So it's very important to work with professionals. And guys, if you want to start typing in your questions, we're going to entertain questions here in a little bit. So if you have any questions for these guys, or if you have something estate planning related for me, I'm happy to do my best at answering it. But guys, tell us a little bit about how your financial planning practice operates, and how folks can find out more out about you and get in touch with you.
Yeah. So I think one thing that differentiates us from other advisors is we do love doing the planning. That's a tax plan for our clients who are looking for a tax plan, who need that type of advice. It's helping them through the estate planning process. So when they get to come see their estate planning attorney, they have an idea of what they're looking for. It's the life insurance, it's all the areas, but if you kind of back up a little bit, one of the things that we have a very strong belief in is we do not believe in just losing a bunch of money just because the market goes down. I don't want things like that dictating our livelihood or the way we live our lives, the income level. So if I just lose half my money in the next bear market of like 2008, that changes your lifestyle. So lifestyle changes can be affected by market. It can be affected by estate planning, or the lack of estate planning can be affected by tax law changes and all those different pieces, not having the right type of insurance in place or too much insurance in place. So our belief starts with, let's not lose a big chunk of money, especially in retirement. And then from there, that keeps your lifestyle and your excitement of retirement higher. And so people tend to be they're happier when they don't lose a bunch of money, and therefore they're more willing to plan through all these things. So that's kind of where what differentiates us, I think, from.
Yeah, I would just add to that, we're holistic planners. So Philip's talking about estate planning and insurance and taxes along with investments, and having all those designations really puts us in the seat and the desire to do that. And we make sure that our plans are easy to understand. We see a lot of people who may have a very complex put together plan, but I'm sure it's the same in your practice. If you don't understand it, it's not worth the paper it's written on. So we spend a lot of time with our clients making sure that it's easy to understand and that they're comfortable.
And so you guys are your office is in North Dallas, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yep. But you have clients, the bulk of your clients are probably all over DFW, as well as some other clients throughout the state and in some other states. Is that right?
That's right.
Something I've seen kind of common in my practice is if a client moves into Texas from another region of the country and they really like their financial planner, from North Carolina or California or New York, they tend to keep them even though they moved. Do y'all find that a lot of people that your clients here, if they move some to Florida, for example, they'll still keep you guys as their planner? Is that common?
Yeah, that's not a bad thing. If your advisor knows you, they know you well, they know who you are and your family, and you agree with what they're doing, there's no reason. That's not a reason to change because you're now it's a reason to come see your estate planning attorney if you move states, but
that's different, right? State law.
State law is totally different, but crossing state lines or crossing from Houston to Dallas, there's no reason to change just because of that. Okay,
and you guys are willing and able, if somebody is, on the far west side of the Metroplex, if they're in Aledo, for example, if they're very interested in meeting with you and you will go to them, is that correct? Okay.
We do a lot of virtual, of course, with the
Okay.
last year, everyone's gotten more comfortable with Zoom.
Yes.
So we do a lot of that, but, we're also willing to visit
Okay.
people where they're at.
Yeah, and of course, the virtual and Zoom, it's gotten very, very big. So, okay, guys, so thank you so much. Are there any questions for
Yes.
myself or for these guys? Okay.
Okay, so the
So
chart,
you guys can't see Erin, but she's here on the other side. She's going to read out your questions, okay?
the chart said withdrawal is free at 59.5 for 5 years for a Roth IRA. Does that mean there's a penalty for withdrawal?
If you withdraw the money prior to 59.5 or 5 years of the first contribution, there is a 10% penalty on that withdrawal,
On the growth,
on the growth.
just
yes.
on the growth. If I put $1,000 into a Roth and that $1,000 goes to 1,500 and it does it within 3 years or 1 year, grows from 1,000 to 1,500, and you take out $1,000, doesn't matter what age you are, doesn't matter how long it's been in there, it could be the next day. That $1,000 is always tax and penalty free. It's the extra 500, the growth that you worry about, the 5 years, the 59.5. It's really the growth you worry about.
In this case, the government is trying to avoid double taxation. So the 1,000 in Philip's example that went in, that's already been taxed, so they don't want to tax it again. But the growth, unless you follow through those rules, that's considered a qualified distribution.
Yes.
Okay, so can an individual have both a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA?
Yes, it can have them, and it's a possibility to contribute to both, but you still have the maximum amount you can do between the two. You can't double up between an
So
IRA.
it's
and a
6,000 year
Roth.
period. So
Right.
you do 3 and 3, for example.
Right.
Okay.
And I would say not only can they probably should. Most people should, depending on their age and their phase of life.
Same thing with 401k and Roth 401k. There's an equal balance of both of those. So make sure you're working with somebody who can balance how much you should put into one versus the other, or one together, and put them in together.
And let me just pause real quick before we have other questions. So let's tell everybody watching at Worth Asset Management, how can they get a hold of you guys? Number one, you have an internet presence, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's kind of the best ways to get a hold of you guys if they'd like to meet with you?
There's a slide. Do you mind?
Yes, I have that up. I'll
Okay.
put it back up.
Okay, so there's gonna be a slide that will answer that question.
Yeah.
Yep. And we will take questions. You want to call or email to the email. We'll call and take questions. We're not we're not chasers. We're not going to go and try to find you and hunt you down and call you. We love answering questions. We love to educate.
Yes, there's no
Joe
cost
said.
or obligation. If you reach out, we're happy to help in any way we can.
Yep. So we love
Okay.
doing.
There are more questions, Aaron?
Yes, if you convert a traditional IRA to a Roth, is there a penalty if you withdraw some before 5 years?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
the simple answer is yes.
Yes.
On the growth,
Yep. On the growth. Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
Is it-
Great question. Yeah.
Is it
Always.
better to convert a large traditional to a Roth all at once or gradually over several years?
everyone's circumstance is different, but most of the time gradually over multiple years, because anything that's converted is taxed. And that will potentially could shoot your income tax rate up to that lowest level at 10% to, close to 40. So in most cases, you'll want to do it gradually.
Yeah, think about if I'm a client that owns a business and I have a big loss in 1 year, that may be a great reason to do a big amount, convert a huge amount to create income that year. But converting depends on the person, depends on your situation. There's some years where I tell people to convert a big chunk because of a loss or something else going on. It's really what you think taxes are going to do too. But I'd say typically, as Joe said, gradually is probably the best way.
With estate planning, are there any benefits or burdens in using a savings bonds to make a down payment on a house or using them on your monthly mortgage payments?
Okay, just tell me that one more time.
Okay. With estate planning, are there any benefits or burdens in using a savings bond to make a down payment on a house or using them for your monthly mortgage payments?
So I would say from the standpoint of what I consider to be estate planning, which is passing down assets to the next generation, it's not going to make a difference. I think what you're looking at is tax reasons. What would make more sense, maybe from an income tax perspective, And so I think I would defer to a CPA on that unless you guys feel like you have a good response. But from the standpoint of estate planning, I don't think that would make much of a difference either way. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. I think a CPA might, but.
Yeah, if your saving bonds are paying you 5% and your mortgage is 2%, I'd probably say keep the saving bond and make the payment. If it's flipped, I'd say probably pay it off. But at the end of the day, you probably want to have your mortgage paid off.
Right.
So especially when you go into retirement and beyond. I think there's a lot of different things in there, but
there are some CPAs though that will say that you want to have a little bit of a mortgage payment. Have you all heard that theory before? I've been told that before, that it could be beneficial from a tax standpoint, but we're not CPA, so I can't real into that, but I have heard that before from a CPA.
If you're itemizing, you can make the numbers work where there is a benefit.
Yeah.
But what I found, I'll speak on my behalf, the emotional side of not having a mortgage typically outweighs any of the tax benefits. So people just feel, generally feel better. Hey, I'm retired. I own this house. No one's coming to take it from me.
I think particularly if you're retired, it has to just be an upside. But maybe if you're still in your peak income earning years, maybe there's some tax advantage, But if you're retired, which a lot of people that I interact with are, certainly not all, but a lot, I would think that having your mortgage paid off is generally a very positive thing. Agree.
Okay, so this person says, I have an estate plan, so should I come in to discuss the distributions to see where this new law and other matters come in for my plan? And if I come in to talk about my estate plan, what do I need to know to prepare and what can I expect?
Okay, so for an estate planning consultation, number one, please always bring in your documents, the documents that you have previous, and even if they're from 1987, right? That I see that not infrequently, things from the 80s and 90s, especially if they're from out of state also. And second, so for us, just like with these guys, we'll offer a complimentary first consultation. So the first consult, we will not charge you, but bring in your estate plan and we'd be happy to take a look at it. You'd sit down with me personally, and then we'd talk about, what you have and how different assets that you have could impact it negatively or positively, and if there's any changes that would be recommended.
And if you don't mind me adding,
No,
I think anybody who's watching, listening, anybody, even people that are not listening and watching, I think anybody should be, if you have an estate plan, even if it's drawn up in the last 3 or 4 years, you ought to come in and sit down, because I think the laws have changed so much and will change again the next few weeks or months. I really think you ought to have somebody come in and look at it and just make sure that it's not only is it all working together, but did you implement everything you were supposed to with beneficiaries and all the other things that's supposed to go? And you want everything moving down the same path at the same rate. You want your will and your beneficiaries to match. You want your trust, and all those things ought to be going, ought to be working together. And the laws changed so much, it's hard to do that, harder.
And let me ask you guys, it makes me curious. So how often do you, and I guarantee you it's more than me, but how often do you have kind of a consult with your existing clientele, ideally, to make sure that they understand where you're at, that everything's on track and they feel comfortable? How often do you guys do that?
Well, we'll try to visit 2 to 3 times a year in a standard year.
Right.
But what we tell everyone is that's the minimum.
Yes.
So there's no maximum. So if events change in someone's life, we want to be that, to use a football analogy, like the quarterback for their plan. So we want to be the phone call if someone's deciding whether to pay off their mortgage or not, or if they have a life change. We're always available. One of the things that both Philip and I really focus on is, having a limited number of clients so that we're able to react, in a timely fashion. But in a short answer, 2 to 3 times a year is typical.
And just so you know, for us guys, we bring our clients in, they're available to come in every 2 years. So we want to have a meeting at least every 2 years to make sure that financial circumstances haven't changed dramatically, family and and beneficiaries and trustees and so forth, those relationships haven't changed. and that laws haven't changed that would impact your plan. But we make ourselves available at any point, but every 2 years is what we recommend unless something comes up that needs to be addressed. But what I tell people is if you're not my client, if you have another firm you're working with and you're happy with them, at a bare minimum with estate planning, have a review every 5 years. Okay, absolute worst case scenario, have a review every 5 years, but we like every 2 years in estate planning. Good. Anything else, Aaron?
Yes, there's a few more. Can I take out money from my IRA at age 70 and put it in a Roth conversion before I reach 72?
Yes.
Yes, I think that's a great way to do it.
Okay, and then this one says that they turn 65 in August 2023. Will my income this year affect my Medicare costs?
Yes.
2
Yes,
years
sir.
before.
Yep.
So 2 years before you're going, they pull the tax return 2 years before you start Medicare. So that 2 years prior is important. That's a really important year for that person. That's this year. You want to make sure you don't, and it's really starting 2 years prior. So every year they pull 2 years back, but you just want to make sure you're not hurting yourself Medicare with the taxes, the extra taxes Medicare could charge you.
And then another one, what does that estate planning appointment cost?
Zero. Yeah. So it's complimentary, just like with these guys. Our first consult is complimentary, and we won't charge you for that.
And then this one, it says, looks like the step up in basis may be going away. Any thoughts on that aspect of estate planning?
Yeah, there's a lot of, from the standpoint of people who don't like to be taxed, probably a lot of positive things that are going to be going away. And what we're going to have to do in estate planning is once changes start happening, we're going to have to see if we can get a little creative to address those things. And we may not be able to. I mean, just like with the Secure Act in 2019, which by the way, had bipartisan support, in Washington, D.C., which rarely happens. That's something that we can't get around, right? So some things we're not able to get around. Other things, like we were saying earlier, there's some loopholes that can be found. So as tax laws change, we're going to have to see what we can do to benefit our clients who are bigger fans of tax avoidance. And we'll see how that goes as things change, and keep everybody updated.
Okay, one last question. Any cost for the 2-year review?
No, the 2-year review is absolutely complimentary. And in fact, for us, just like with these guys, it's not that we just keep our door shut for 2 years and then in 2 years, okay, welcome back. Our clients who have things come up periodically, maybe they're buying a new property, maybe they're getting a new account, maybe they have a beneficiary they're concerned about, they just want to talk about different options for that beneficiary. We don't charge for those conversations either. So I'm not going to talk to you for 20 minutes and then send you a bill. So, but the review is absolutely complimentary.
That was it for the questions.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
That was super informative for me based on the questions we got. I think it was very informative for everyone else. And thank you guys for tuning in. For those of you guys who are on my email list, next time we do an interview with the experts, we'll be sure to let you know. But thanks so much, guys, and have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks.